Welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we fix a mistake that I made a year ago. Stay tuned. Last March, I bought these Bilstein 5160 shocks for all four corners of my truck. The other day I noticed that the driver's side front shock was losing a lot of oil. In fact, it had no oil at all. And it turns out, after I did some digging, I had accidentally bought the shocks for a 4-inch to 6-inch lift. My truck's completely stock, so my suspicion is I must have hit a bump and blew out this fitting right here. That's all I can think of. Like I said, they're a year old and there's no reason they should have gone bad in that much time. So these ones right here, I have two for the front, are the correct ones. They're for a 0-inch to a 3-inch lift. So we'll be installing these today. As you can see, I blew the top off them. So this one is leaking oil all over the place and needs to be replaced. Oops. First thing I'm going to do is start by jacking the truck up, getting the wheel off the ground. I have the back tires blocked off as well as the emergency brake on. If I'm being honest, I'm feeling a little lazy today. I'd normally break out the big jack, but today I'm just going to use a bottle jack. Now that I got the wheel off, I'm going to be using a 21mm socket to remove the bolt that holds the lower part of the shock on. Just like that. Next, what we're going to do is there's a 19mm nut on the top of the shock stud, and the shock stud itself has a 6mm Allen as a way for you to hold it from spinning. I was able to get in there with a socket extension up above the battery and just take the 19 off without needing the Allen, but probably means it wasn't tight enough. Once you get the 19mm nut off the top of the shock, you're going to reach in and grab the metal plate as well as the rubber isolator. Now what you're going to do is take these 14mm shock tower nuts off. There's one here that you can reach. Two that you can reach inside the engine bay. Using a long extension, I'm able to reach in with a 14mm socket. Oh geez, I dropped it. Next, being that these are external reservoir shocks, I can remove the clamp that holds them onto the frame. Now that I have the shock tower unbolted, I can lift it up off of the shock, pull it off to the side. I can pull it all the way out. And I can begin to remove the shock. Now that we have the driver's side front shock out, you can see just how greasy it really is. You can see grease was definitely coming out of this fitting here. And just in comparison, there's the new one. I'll pull the passenger shock as well into a side-by-side just because that one hasn't yet started to leak, but we're going to replace it anyways. Now we're going to do the reverse of what we just did. I'm going to take the new shock and drop it in through the engine compartment. I went ahead and left the band on the shock that keeps it compressed during shipping, and I lined up the bottom. I'll put that bolt back in the bottom before putting everything else into place. Okay, this is a 21mm socket. I'm going to get that bolt started. Now what I'm going to do is take this rubber isolator and there's a hole in the top of the shock tower. I'm going to lift the shock tower up and I'm going to put the cone side of that rubber isolator towards the top and then bring the shock tower back down. And loosely put the nuts back on. Next is the hard part. I need to get this shiny washer onto the stud of the shock before it goes up through the rubber isolator, and that is very difficult. So what I'm going to try to, oh boy. What I'm going to need to do is somehow compress this shock, which is really hard. Compress that shock. Just like that, and let the shock off. That's the hardest part, and it's really hard by yourself, but if you could get an extra pair of hands, it'd be a little easier. Take that strap off. Now I can take my 14mm box wrench and tighten down the, excuse me, I'm out of breath. Tighten down the shock tower. Okay, that needs to be snugged up still, but I'll go from above and get the other two. Next, while I'm here, I can tighten up the reservoir. Now back on top, I have this black washer, and it actually says upper. I don't know if you can see that. And this flat isolator and my 19mm nut. I'm going to start by putting the rubber isolator on. So you can see that. I'm now going to tighten on that 19mm nut. And there you have it. One driver's side shock installed. Granted, I already had the mounting hardware behind here, but that's pretty easy. When I did it last year, you drill and tap the frame. It's not as hard as it sounds. Now I'll put the tire back on and lower the truck back down. There it is, driver's side done. On to the passenger side. As you can see, this shock, which was the driver's side, is way greasier than the other one. Also, I don't know if you could see in the video, but when I took the shock tower off of the driver's side, the shock itself didn't decompress. Unlike the passenger side, when I took the shock tower off of this one, it started to decompress really rapidly and had actually a lot of pressure on it. So well guys, it's the next day. Took the truck for a drive and ended up stopping for some pizza. Needless to say, the food coma was real, so here we are. The truck's driving great. I ended up finding a gravel road to drive on, and the front end is clearly much more stable. Before, with the blown shock, I was bouncing all over the place side to side, and the truck's really firmed up. I highly recommend these Bilstein 5160 shocks. If you like the content of this video and our channel, leave a thumbs up and subscribe. We have a lot of projects coming down the pike for this truck as well as the 97 12 valve. Stay tuned.